Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Time to say good morning to Otaki Community Board Ward Councillor James Cootes. Morning, James.
Good morning. It seems like forever since we've spoken.
Yeah, well, it has, actually. You've been so busy, haven't you, with LTP submissions and goodness knows what else, and you're down in Wellington submitting to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. How did that go?
Yeah, that's right. We went down to the Big Smoke yesterday, and there was a contingency of us, actually, from KCDC presenting to Greater Wellington at their hearings. So His Worship the Mayor, myself, Mike Cardiff, Janet Holborough, John Howson, and a couple of the staff accompanied us down to present at the hearings just in regards to Greater Wellington's proposed rate increases.
And you got it across to them, do you think?
Look, I think we did. Hearings are always an interesting animal. We, obviously go through them ourselves as councillors, and for example, for ours, they start at 9 in the morning and finish at 8 in the evening, and at times it can be quite lively, and at times it can be rather dull and boring, and no disrespect to the residents that come in, but you can go from one extreme to the other. So it's always difficult to captivate the attention of the councillors, although their role is to sit there and listen, and you hope that they do. I think we got our points across. We had, each of us had topics that we were talking to, and essentially we were saying that the rate increases for Kapiti are too high. Many will laugh and say, well, the same can be said for KCDC's rates. I said at the hearing, it challenged me as I was looking at it. We were saying that our KCDC's approach has been around affordability and fairness, and so then when I looked at Greater Wellington, I'm like, well, these is kind of the same argument, so how can I be opposed to, I guess, the argument that they've got? But when I looked at it further, they're talking about fairness, but they haven't considered affordability, and that's what I raised with them yesterday.
Yes, and that's affordability across the region, or were you talking just basically around Otaki?
Well, look, certainly for Otaki, but across the Kapiti coast.
Yeah, sure.
So we, and again, we've been challenged by our residents in our hearings around affordability. For some residents out, say, Waikanae Beach, they're facing increases much higher than the average of 4.7%, so some in the 20s. And their argument is they might be asset rich, but cash poor. And so when we're talking about affordability, that's not affordable for them. So that's, certainly given us something to think about, and we're talking with staff around those examples. At the end of the day, the reality is if those ratepayers don't pay it, then those funds, say it's $500,000 or $1 million worth of rates, need to be paid from somebody else.
Sure.
So it's challenging. Certainly, I'm not saying that those ratepayers are wrong. I'm just saying that the solution, or who pays it, is the challenging part.
Because Greater Wellington Regional Council are rightfully saying that a lot of their increase is for flood protection, and if we don't get that flood protection, we'll go cross anyhow if something does happen.
Yeah, the difficulty is, you would argue they're not doing enough on the Kapiti coast. Their response back to us is, tell us what you want us to do less of. The issues that we raised around affordability is the median income for Kapiti is around, I think it's around 48,000 compared to Wellington, which is up around, I need to be careful because I can't remember the figures exactly, but I think around $78,000 to $90,000. So, there is an issue of affordability there. They've certainly got a greater means in the Wellington city to cover that proportion of rates with the ratepayer base that they have down there, and also Greater Wellington has assets that derive income that KCDC doesn't. So to simply say that we're going to sort of thrust those increases on the Kapiti Coast residents, I think, is unfair. The other thing that we raise as an example is that Otaki, and not just because I'm the Otaki Ward Councillor, but the Wairarapa has a differential because they receive a lower level of public transport. However, Otaki doesn't, yet we receive a lower level of public transport compared to the rest of the district. So that's something else that we raised with them.
Yes, transport has been an argument for some time, hasn't it? And they're still thinking, the Greater Wellington Regional Council, getting some sort of train service between Waikanae and Otaki. So I suppose if you look at it that way, well, the money's got to come from somewhere. So,
look, I absolutely agree. But I guess what I would say was, deliver on the public transport options that we're asking for in terms of increased services before you start increasing our rates. Because if you're going to increase our rates and then maybe at some stage increase the services, that's, I think that's a bit rough.
But behind the eight ball.
Yeah, and then the other thing as well that we raised with them was in regards to the rates remission. So we provide $200,000 rates remission to our ratepayers. They also have the option of the government subsidy as well. And we've basically said to Greater Wellington, you have a policy to enable you to be able to do this, but you do not contribute to that. So when we have ratepayers that are not in a position to be able to afford to pay those rates, they can come and apply for a rates remission. And effectively, we're covering not only the KCDC portion, but also the Greater Wellington as well when we provide a remission. If you imagine that Greater Wellington proportion adds to the burden. So we've asked them for a contribution towards our rates remission scheme, which I'd like to think that they're considering.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just locally, before we go, you had a meeting on Tuesday night, was it? Anything come out of that meeting?
No, look, to be fair, it wasn't. It was a reasonably light agenda. There was nothing sort of significant that's come out of it. That being said, we are, facing some things in Otaki. I'm just in the middle of drafting or finalising a letter to the ministers and also to the chief executive of Stand. We've got the what's known locally as the Otaki Health Camp that is been confirmed as closing. So there's obviously concerns around the services that they provide, but not only that, the 31 people that are employed there.
Who owns that land, James?
That's a whole other discussion. So there is a bit of a discussion going on around what happens with that land afterwards. I believe that that Stand technically own the land, but there's a discussion around whether they should be in a position to sell that land and what was the original commitment given when it was gifted and so forth. So I know that others are looking into that.
Lovely. Thanks for your time this morning, James, and we'll catch you in a fortnight.
Good talking again. Cheers.
James Cootes, Otaki Ward Councillor here on Beach FM.
106.3 Beach FM.